2018 in-stream flow appropriation. As previously covered in agenda item number 14, 7 ISF recommendations from January of this year were uncontested. This agenda item covers the one ISF which was contested, which is on Abrams Creek. Pursuant to Rule 5D of the rules concerning the in-stream flow program, the Buckhorn Valley Metropolitan District Number 1 filed a notice to contest this appropriation. Staff contacted the district and a meeting was held on May 2nd, where mutually acceptable terms and conditions were discussed, but no resolution to the matter was reached. Staff recommends that the board designate a hearing officer for this contested in-stream flow appropriation. It has been the board's past practice to name the Deputy Attorney General for Natural Resources and Environment section in this role. And staff further recommends that the board set the hearing date for this appropriation to be held in conjunction with the board's November 14th and 15th, 2018 meeting. Typically, the board holds ISF hearings in conjunction with the September board meeting, but staff believes the extra time provided by this request will help facilitate an agreement between the parties and hopefully prevent a hearing altogether.
Any questions for Rob? Okay. I would entertain a motion. Okay. Been moved by Director Gallagher, second by Director Anderson, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 16. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed. Oh, there we go. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Laura. So any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 17. This is an update on the Himes Creek in-stream flow recommendation in Water Division 7. This is an informational item only. No board action is requested at this time. Some quick history. The U.S. Forest Service recommended to the CWCB in January 2016 the establishment of an in-stream flow on Himes Creek. Staff has been working with the U.S. Forest Service and other interested stakeholders over the past 2 years on the quantification methodology to be used in this ISF recommendation. At the March board meeting, staff reported that we intended to bring the Himes Creek in-stream flow to the May meeting, where staff would request the board to form its intent to appropriate. At this time, staff is not ready to provide such a recommendation. Staff and the interested stakeholders continue to have discussions with our next meeting scheduled for June 1st. Depending on the outcome of these discussions, staff may request board action to form its intent to appropriate an ISF water right on Himes Creek at the July 2018 meeting. So I can answer any questions about that if there are any.
Questions for Rob on this item? Director Trick.
Yes, who are the interested stakeholders?
So the interested stakeholders is the U.S. Forest Service, the Dolores Water Conservancy District, and Southwestern Conservation Water District. Thank you.
Have agenda item 18, lease of water for in-stream flow. And that's Linda.
Good afternoon, Linda Bassey with the Stream and Lake Protection Section. Agenda item 18 is the board's first look at a proposed lease of water for in-stream flow use on the Frying Pan River. It's an informational item with no action required. Andrew, is this going to, does it have to warm up? Okay. So this is located in Water Division 5. And This came about as a result of some discussions with the Roaring Fork Conservancy, Rudai Water and Power Authority, and the River District. We actually were up there giving a presentation on the lease we did from the Ute Water Conservancy District for releases from Rudai to use in the 15-mile reach. And we started talking about some problems that have come up in the winter on the Frying Pan River. And the idea of this lease came up to supplement winter flows in the Frying Pan below Rudai down to the confluence with the Roaring Fork. So the River District has offered a lease. It would be a one-year lease of up to 3,500 acre-feet of water that the district holds in Rudai under a perpetual contract with the Bureau of Reclamation. And the board would use it in the Frying Pan to preserve and to improve the natural environment to a reasonable degree. We're also proposing that the board would pay for the lease with the funds, construction funds authorized by Section 3760 123.7. You may recall that the legislature authorized an appropriation of up to $1 million annually starting in 2008 for the costs of water acquisitions. So here's a vicinity map. Rudai is on the right, and that's our existing in-stream flow on the Frying Pan River. And so just a quick review of the in-stream flow Rule 6 process that governs water acquisitions, and a primer on it for our new board members. Requires a minimum of 2 board meetings for the board to consider and decide whether to accept an offer of water for in-stream flow use. Today's the first look where we invite you to ask questions, raise any issues that you want us to look at before we bring it back to you and ask for approval. Within 20 days of this meeting today, anyone can ask the board to hold a hearing on the acquisition. If that doesn't happen, then we will come back to you at the July board meeting and request approval. Our statute requires us to request recommendations on proposed acquisitions from Parks and Wildlife, BLM, and the Forest Service, and we've sent letters. Although you do have a letter from CPW attached to your memo, there's also, speaking of attachments, there's also the offer letter from the River District, which has a memo from the Roaring Fork Conservancy that outlines the proposed lease and the basis of the needs for the lease, and then a map and the CPW letter. We've also provided notice of this proposal to our in-stream flow subscription mailing list and the state engineer's substitute water supply plan notification list for Water Division 5. So the water proposed for the lease is up to 3,500 acre-feet. And in addition to municipal and industrial uses, the contract with Reclamation expressly authorizes the district to use this water to supplement winter in-stream flows in the Frying Pan River. And the decreed uses of Rudai Reservoir include piscatorial. The leased water would be used in conjunction with our existing, in-stream flow. Winter flows in that reach are decreed for 39 CFS. This lease would only be used during the winter months. So the natural environment supports a gold medal trout fishery renowned for really good sized brown and rainbow trout. Those fish primarily feed on aquatic macroinvertebrates and mottled sculpin. And in the winter, when temperatures get down into single digits, and flows are less than 70 CFS, that's a prime condition for anchor ice to form, and that interferes with trout fry, and it has adverse impacts on aquatic macroinvertebrate numbers. So that's the problem that's been identified that this lease is trying to address. So we would use the leased water to preserve the natural environment by supplementing the existing 39 CFS in-stream flow when needed. Typically, I don't think we would need to provide flows to meet the 39 CFS. Reclamation has a standard release pattern in the winter that sometimes goes up to 50 CFS. So I think the main use under this lease would be to improve by requesting and protecting water to help meet flow recommendations from Roaring Fork Conservancy and CPW to prevent that anchor ice from forming. So we're still working out the details, but the Roaring Fork Conservancy, CWCB, and the River District would coordinate on requesting reclamation to make releases of that leased water. And the proposed use is authorized by decree and by contract. The district's enterprise has a water marketing policy that governs their leases of water. It's kind of a formal process, and we also have if we are spending money on a lease, our state controller has a form that we're supposed to use. So we're going to have the battle of the contract forms, which will be challenging and fun. So we'll negotiate the terms of the lease, which will include the amount, the timing, price and payments, and any other terms that are deemed necessary. And we'll work on marrying those two forms and hopefully succeed on that. Rule 6 requires the board to look at several factors. I've gone through some of them already. Some of them don't apply here. Because this is a lease of water stored in priority and released for delivery to an in-stream flow reach, it doesn't involve a change of water right, and so we don't need to look at historical use and return flows and material injury. We believe this lease will promote maximum utilization of waters of the state because the stored water will be released and beneficially used to preserve and improve the natural environment. And then it will be available for subsequent use downstream of the in-stream flow reach. We've consulted with our interstate section and can say that the proposed lease does not negatively impact any interstate compact. Another factor is looking at whether we can stack the acquired water with an existing in-stream flow right. And so what that means is, for example, if 39 CFS is flowing through the reach, then we would ask for a release of additional water to bring the flows up to 31, and that would be to 70. That would be stacked on top of the existing in-stream flow. We've consulted with the Division 5 division engineer, and he's indicated that this proposal will be administrable. And the anticipated benefits of this lease would be to bring flow rates up to our decreed rates when needed and to help meet those recommended flow rates to prevent anchor ice, which would benefit both the trout and macro invertebrates in the winter. The cost of the transaction, the water market policy set a price of $65.25 per acre foot. And they have a $400 non-reimbursable application fee. So if we're looking at 3,500 acre feet, that would total up to $228,775. We would just be paying for the amount of water we use. So we'll give you the up to amount, but it could be less if we don't use the full 3,500 acre feet. And we pay for it with those construction fund monies. And because we are proposing to spend money out of that account, Financial Policy 19 governs those expenditures. And so it requires the board to look at some additional factors. One is the financial aspects of the proposal. And so the district enterprise updated its water marketing policy in January of this year because they were starting to have some thoughts about leasing water for in-channel use, and that was, they didn't want to charge a municipal or an ag rate. They wanted to set a rate specifically for that. So that's where the $65.25 was established. And the other costs would be just related to negotiating and finalizing the lease, and that fits into what we do all the time, into our ordinary business of CWCB staff, and the AG's office will, of course, have our attorneys help us out with this lease. Policy 19 also requires the board to, when it's acquiring water to improve the natural environment, to look at the balance between consumptive and non-consumptive needs on the subject stream reach. And this proposal doesn't appear to affect that balance. The released water will probably go through the district's hydropower plant and generate power. then we'll use it in the in-stream flow reach. Those are both non-consumptive uses. And then it will be available to the next diverter in priority below the reach on the Frying Pan River. And we've been told there aren't any winter calls on the Frying Pan, or I believe on the Roaring Fork, but you know, someone probably will need that water and divert it. So it's meeting non-consumptive needs on the Frying Pan River, as we've already discussed today. Policy 19 also requires some additional detailed input from Colorado Parks and Wildlife, which we are still working to acquire. We need CPW to tell us the degree to which the acquired water will provide additional usable habitat in the in-stream flow reach, and an analysis of the degree to which the acquired water benefits the natural environment, and then doesn't provide too much water so that it would adversely impact the aspects of the natural environment we're trying to protect. Like here, we want to make sure we're not washing those trout fry down the river. So the field biologists have looked at this, and they think 70 CFS is an acceptable flow rate for that, but we will have CPW address this. Jay Skinner's in Hawaii, and so he will join us in July with Katie Birch, who will be the new Jay Skinner, and will address some of these factors for you. We've gotten their initial input, which you have in the letter, and we'll hear more from them in July. So we've done some stakeholder outreach. We met with Council for Southeastern Water Conservancy District to discuss their concerns, including they would like to see some recognition by the board and potentially documentation in the lease that this lease will be in conformance with the Frying Pan Arkansas Project Act and with the operating principles. We also need to work with the River District to obtain approval from Reclamation of the lease, and we need to work with CPW to obtain that additional information required by Policy 19. So our recommendation today is just tell us what you think. If you have any questions or concerns, please tell us and we can follow up on those. Consider entering into this lease and paying for the lease with those funds. With that, are there any questions?
Questions for Linda on this first look? Director Wells?
Very minor procedural thing. So it's a 120-day period, but if no one asks for a hearing, it can be 60, just 2 meetings.
No, it's a 20-day period in the rules.
There's 120, doesn't it? Okay.
Well, the 120 days is in our statute. When the board first receives an offer for an acquisition of water, it has 120 days to decide whether to accept or reject it. Our rules provide that when the board first looks at it at the first board meeting, any person has 20 days to request a hearing.
Okay, two different
numbers of
It's not
days.
at least 120 days, it's within 120 days.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Jack or Director Goebel?
Thanks, Linda. And I was just curious, after it goes through this stretch, so who owns the water, or is it just like kind of lost, is control lost after it goes through this stretch, or does CWCB continue to own it?
We are just contracting with the district to use it down to the confluence with the Frying Pan. It's possible that its presence in the Roaring Fork will assist flows to meet our in-stream flows, but the lease is just calling out our use on the Frying Pan River. So if someone wants to divert it right below that confluence, it is there and available to them.
And is this like a pilot project for 1 year, or is there a plan to do it for multiple years?
Right now, we're just talking about 1 year, but I think if it works and it helps, that we may be, they may come back and want to enter into a similar lease.
I had a question. What was this water used for prior? I know you said there was no return flow obligations or anything like that, but what did they use it for that they're no longer going to be
I think
using?
they may have just held it in storage or used it to generate hydropower. These will be additional releases in the winter months that previously they have not made.
That effect. So if they're using this as a new release in the wintertime, does that affect the amount of storage that they have to then fill up to meet any summertime obligation? Do you follow me?
I do, but I don't think I can answer that question. And someone from the River District was going to be here and he ran into car trouble, and they will be at our July meeting and can answer the questions about their water rights. And although I'm sure DWR could weigh into that question as well.
I was just thinking, if we did this on the South Platte out of our reservoir and it was for another use, we would have to then hold our reservoir down by 3,500 acre feet.
Well, it's for a decreed use though.
And you do make an excellent point, Jim, and we've had to address that in some other leases, that question about releases like that, and the question about paper filling. So we're very much interested in that issue. But what I think I heard you say, and I think you said it again just right at the end, that this water is decreed for that in-stream use.
For piscatorial use, and the contract calls out in-stream flow use, but they'll also be using it to generate hydropower.
And so I think then what we really have to deal with is the question of, could the water commissioner, the division engineer, protect it from exchanges in that reach, which is not an issue, I would suspect.
I don't think there are any exchanges occurring in the winter on that reach.
So in that way, it is being released for a decreed use, and we don't have to worry about that paper fill.
Other questions? All right. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 19, Statewide Water Supply Initiative. Greg Johnson.
Greg Johnson, CWCB staff. Agenda item 19. This is an update on the statewide water supply initiative that we are currently working on as we speak. Today we wanted to go through a handful of things to give you a status update, where things stand on the various components of this update, as well as really dive into some of the conversations we've been having around rebranding and what it might look like with the statewide water supply initiative, really how it fits with the Basin Implementation Plan, as well as the Colorado Water Plan. As you all know, that's really been the cycle that we've had for the last number of years since the water plan, is the three big items, the trifecta, if you will. So the local piece being the basin plans, the policy piece being the Colorado Water Plan, and then really the technical foundation, the study, the supply and demand study that underlies all of it, being the statewide water supply initiative that we're currently updating. This has all, of course, been evolving since SWASI statewide water supply initiative was initiated in 2003, 2004. And it's a very different landscape now that we have the water plan. So we've had these conversations before, but of course things are evolving as we speak this year. We've really been ramping up our communication with the roundtables especially. We've taken the opportunity with the IBCC as well recently to really get some of that feedback. So today I'm going to give some of that status update on some of the technical pieces, but then also about the broader conversation. I'm also going to be tag teaming with Russ Sands, who, as Becky Mitchell, Director Mitchell had mentioned earlier, one of our new hires. He has been wonderful, really taking the load off of me in particular and really helping with the project management on this project. So that's been a great help to have. And we'll get into the timeline a little bit as well. So just a reminder for a lot of folks on the board and new board members, this study this time around will be very, very different than what it was historically. In the past, we had what we had referred to as our wedge diagram, with the fairly simple math that we had. So projecting out, what the demands were going to be, largely focused on municipal and industrial. Of course, we did have an agricultural analysis as well, and various components of environmental and recreational pieces. But really looking, this is the wedge diagram for municipal and industrial demand, looking out to the year 2050, and then subtracting off what we knew was happening. So the planned projects, what we had called the identified projects and processes, the IPPs, subtracting that off, And then the result, the difference was, was the gap. And so that was how we had done things before. That really framed the conversation for the water plan, a lot of other policy issues that we focused on for the last 10 plus years. This time, we've been tasked with really taking the scenarios that were built into the water plan. So Chapter 6 of the water plan documents these 5 different scenarios. And so we are now implementing a scenario planning process, just like a lot of other utilities and states are, especially in the Western U.S. So to look at, 5 different distinct futures that are all equally feasible, that could happen sometime down the road, but not just drawing kind of a straight line and bounding it with, high, medium, and low, but instead looking at these different drivers and really being able to tease out, things like how climate change, may affect hydrologic variability, how population certainly could be affected in these different scenarios, and all of those other drivers are factored in. So not only are we doing a scenario planning analysis, but we are also doing a hydrologic analysis. So instead of looking at simply demands and subtracting out projects, we are using the state's DSS models, so the Colorado Decision Support System models that we have been creating along with Division of Water Resources for about 25 years now. Have heavily invested in that. Steve Whitty this morning had talked about the ArcDSS, which is one of the ones that is now in progress, which presents some complications but also opportunities because we are actually getting into that development right now. So there are bits and pieces that we can use for that. But that is one of the ways that we are doing this is, using those models that we have to run the numbers, look at the stream networks, look at the wealth of data that we have largely through the Division of Water Resources, where diversions are occurring, where return flows come back to the river, groundwater pumping, all of that is in there. So all that to say that it's very different this time around, but much more comprehensive, a much broader scientific study. So it will be very, I think, a different exercise for the board once we start getting the data and looking at that and trying to figure out what the message is, what the storyline is, where we have things that are relatively wetter and unfortunately drier in some of these different scenarios. So stay tuned. We do not have much of the data yet. We do have the fact sheets. We've been getting some pretty good feedback on these. We have just these simple 2-page fact sheets for each of the major sectors that we're looking at with the study. These are available on the website. We also have hard copies that we had handed out, I believe, at the last board meeting. My apologies, we forgot to bring extra hard copies for new board members. We can definitely get those in your hands. And this does a fairly good job, again, at a very high level of laying out, what the study is, what it isn't, how it's different from last time. A few kind of broad updates on some of these different pieces. So again, we are doing scenario planning and hydrologic modeling. The graph that you see up top is actually pulled from the data that we had from the Colorado River Water Availability Study. We had a couple different phases of that study that the board had commissioned within the last 5 or 6 years. Well, probably actually more than that now, 7, 8 years. That has been updated. We have a wealth of hydrologic data from the modeling that occurred as part of that study that, among other things, used some of the climate change models, what's called the CMIP-5 and CMIP-3, to look at how that affects hydrology throughout the state. And so we have these 3 different pieces from that, again, from the water plan, the decision was made to pick these 3 as kind of the official representation. So we had the current, we had hot and dry, and then we had the cleverly termed in between. So that is what we're running with, but we are leveraging all the data that we have from that. That's one example of how that's being plugged into the scenario planning this time around. For the population projections, those are all, again, tied back to those scenarios. The scenarios, just as a reminder again, were developed by the IBCC with input of the roundtables. A lot of work went into those. They're basically about 2 or 3 paragraphs for each of those 5 scenarios. But every phrase was really parsed out and to some extent fought over, what things should be in there or should not. And so our job now is to go through each of those phrases for each of these applicable areas and try and interpret what that means and especially how we can quantify that. So for the population projections, we basically split that out into 3 different types of counties. So we have mountain resort counties, we have urban center counties, and we have everyone else. And so based on what those scenarios say, a lot of those will say things like, we are going to grow denser in urban centers, we are going to grow denser in mountain resort communities along the I-70 corridor, for example. And that's how we did these statistical analyses with the population that we have. This is one of the things that we are starting to get the data from. We had actually done the analysis with 2016 data that we had from the State Demographer's Office. The benefit now, too, is that we have State Demographer data through the year 2050, whereas last time around when we did the SWASI 2010 update, we only had it through the year 2035. So we actually had to go through a very complicated process of running their economic models again, which involved a whole host of assumptions around where growth was occurring, different industries, mining, all these different things throughout the state. This time we do not have to do that. We can just run straight with the SDO numbers that we have, which is great. But we are varying those, by the county types, and have actually just recently updated that with the 2017 data. So the state demographer, Elizabeth Garner, updates that every year, I believe in November. So this 2017 baseline will be what officially goes in to the work that we're doing now. And then, of course, everything is sequenced with all the data and all the different things that we need to do. So this then feeds directly, of course, into the municipal and industrial demands and all the data that we have. From the 1051 information, which leads into this, this is, you'll notice there's a lack of absolute data on the y-axis there. I mean, absolute numbers. This is just to show relative comparison. We are starting to get the information from the 1051 reporting, so the water conservation data reporting, all covered entities, so water providers that deliver over 2,000 acre feet of treated water are required to report their data. Data is not perfect. We still have a lot of data gaps and inconsistencies year to year, but it's a great place to start, and this is exactly why we had wanted to do this when that legislation was passed a number of years ago. So we're looking at indoor use versus outdoor use, what it looks like in the different basins. We also have data from water efficiency plans. We've even done some targeted outreach, especially in some of the other more rural basins where we had some data gaps because there weren't as many covered entities and weren't as many water efficiency plans. So we've been making some calls, really trying to round up as much of the good information that we can. And then, of course, the basin implementation plans, we've mined those as much as we could where there was relevant data. Similarly, on the current agricultural demands by basin, have not got to any of the projections yet. So, actually doing the quantification of those scenarios, that comes next. But we have been looking at the DSS information that we have. There's an error here with the Republicans, not supposed to be that big. But that's, obviously this is draft. This is, again, one way to show the different demand level that we have, breaking out wet, dry, average years, groundwater demands versus surface water demands, and looking at irrigation water requirement and efficiencies and how it plays into those in different areas. And then on the environmental and recreational analysis, there are two primary pieces to that particular work. If you remember, a lot of the task that we were given was to do a better job quantifying environmental needs this time around, which is always pretty tricky how you do that, especially with these different scenarios. The decision was made to really focus on these two things. So that quantification piece is a flow tool. So we are currently developing a flow tool that will take all the modeling output, so all the hydrologic information, monthly flows, for 50, 60 years for each of those 5 different scenarios, and create this new tool that looks at all those flows and then ties it back to certain environmental and recreational attributes, some of these macro categories, so things like boating, fishing, cold water fish, warm water fish, and then, looks at the different flows in different places and where some of those needs, those flow ecology relationships are being met or not being met, relatively speaking. That, of course, is also tied directly into the other big piece, which is a very thorough update and refinement to the what we had previously called the non-consumptive needs assessment database. So just now we've switched the terminology, so environmental and recreational database. We're doing a very thorough update to that. That will be a web-based mapping tool. We have fresh data from Parks and Wildlife and all the other folks that we work with that's going into that. We also have a number of refinements we're doing on the base layer for that. So we'd actually based it on USGS's NHD, the National Hydrography Data Set, which is no longer maintained. So we're switching to the Source Water Route Framework, which Division of Water Resources is maintaining, which is better fit for us, of course, in the state of Colorado, which involves the different segments there. You can see some of the crossover, the orange, what was not in the Source Water Route Framework. So we're working on the nuts and bolts of that data right now. And then finally, the finance costing tool. One of the things that we really want to focus on this time around with Statewide Water Supply Initiative is getting better cost information. This is something that we had tried to do for the water plan when we canvassed all the different basin plans and got the best numbers we could. And that's written up. I think that's in Chapter 9 of the water plan. But we really want to keep getting more refined information as much as possible To help with that, we're creating a costing tool, fairly high level, but taking the parameters of specific projects, looking at costing curves and percent values, and direct costs, indirect costs, annual operating costs, and starting to have a tool that can put better numbers on some of these projects that are out there, some of the concepts that are coming up through the basin plans. So hopefully that will be helpful once that's done. And then the other piece that I just wanted to make sure that didn't fall off the radar, we have the things that I've been calling the kitchen sink. So the Statewide Water Supply Initiative RFP, when it was released, had the big obvious things, so the ag analysis, the M&I, and everything else. But there were a number of these other case studies, if you will, that were really trying to dial into some of the other issues within the water plan to help us get better data on some of these little things that are out. Well, and I shouldn't say little. Some of these are major, but as far as the scope is concerned, they are fairly little, so we don't have a whole lot of resources. But we still wanted to be able to get a little bit better data and that would help guide our discussion from a policy standpoint moving forward for the next iteration of the water plan, and where we may spend other resources to get more research done. So we've got things, the case market study, the water markets case study, economic impacts of shortages case study, largely kind of modeled after some work that's been done in Texas. We're using BBC Research and Consulting, so Doug Jevons is our main expert on that. We have a reuse case study and an ATM case study that are really just getting off the ground, so we're really just scoping those right now. And then similarly, the storage opportunities case study that's building off of our dam site inventory. There's a CWCB dam site inventory that I don't think has been updated for about 20 years. So we're taking that, looking at that, and then also there was some work that was done for the water plan with the Division of Water Resources looking at existing storage in the state and storage opportunities that may be there with existing dams that have not been fully utilized and that may have other issues and restrictions and whatnot. So that's just wanted to make you all aware of that. As far as timing and milestones are concerned, this was our graphic from before. We've got the 3 main phases of the study. We are now squarely into phase 2, that middle blue box there. So, running the numbers, doing the technical evaluations. Phase 3 is the reporting. We do hope to have a lot of the data and the tools starting to roll out by the end of the calendar year. So we're shooting for, November, December to start getting some of this stuff in front of you. And then wrap up phase 3, so the actual final report, about a year from now. So end of the fiscal year next year, so June of 2019. And then the base implementation plan updates, Russ will be talking a little bit more about this. We've been having more conversations with the roundtables about some of those expectations and where that might be heading and how all this kind of fits together.
Russ Sands, Colorado Water Conservation Board. Thanks for allowing me to speak. Just to build a little bit on what Greg was talking about, we recognize that one of the more important pieces of this is how we're going to message things moving forward. So communications and developing a strategy is critical to the success of this program and this document. Not having it just sit on the shelf and actually be utilized, and really recognizing this is first step for us, and updating the water plan is critical. To do that, we've been trying to solicit a bit of public feedback, primarily through focus groups right now. We've worked on a data dissemination plan that loosely breaks up some buckets of targeted outreach that we would want to do in terms of preparing messaging for general public, for media and legislators, and then also for water experts, including the roundtables. So as we do this, some of these focus group calls, we've talked to about 30 different stakeholders that we just selected to kind of be representatives across the state. And some of my favorite feedback today, we asked them, what does success look like, and what keeps you up at night with regards to this? And one of my favorite comments was, there's a lot that keeps me up at night. Swazi isn't one of them. To that end, we have gotten other good feedback that we've utilized. One of the things being that it's a bit difficult to message, how do you message this topic? So to that end, we've had some thoughts that we've been kind of highlighting and showcasing a bit as we've gone around to IBCC and to the West Slope Caucus to talk a little bit about how we might visualize this a little bit differently and package it a bit different to really take this from these discrete efforts of SWASI, the BIPs, and the water plan update to really building it around the water plan and making this so that SWASI is really seen as the first step in updating the water plan. So to that end, this is we're open, we're taking feedback now, but in terms of some of the focus groups we've rolled this out to, they thought this would be a really helpful concept. So it's something that we're toying around with. As Greg noted, we will be working on these basin implementation plan updates as kind of the next step in the process outlined in Chapter 11 of the Water Plan. We have got pushed to discuss these a little bit sooner than this kind of paced process, only because there's a lot of interest, and that interest varies quite a bit, all the way from Director Gallagher's roundtable talking about wanting to do full-on modeling and really digging into it, to Director Goebel's basin roundtable talking about, really if money's limited, we just want to focus on the IPPs and updating those. So we're trying to, again, get some feedback on how to best do this and how to kind of better standardize the process and get a little bit stronger metrics that we can use that, again, help support funding. So to that end, we've been asking, as we've gone around to some of the West Slope Caucus and the IBCC as well, done a little bit of polling. So in general, I think the feedback kind of supports that, it's about 50-50. Sorry, it's a little bit cut off, but about 50-50 on, if they're ready to implement, update their implementation plans currently, which is a bit of maybe, there's a bit of gray area there, but we've got time. And then trying to really drill in on what's the right level of detail. Is this really a full rehash of the narrative for folks? Is it more focused on the IPPs? Again, a mixed response there. But in general, strong response, 72% felt that the IPPs and metrics around those could be enhanced. And this is a little bit of just a comparison of West Slope and IBCC. We asked them specifically, should we consider developing like a task group that would tackle this issue and really look into strengthening these metrics and general support, but something that we're going to continue looking into. So as we move forward, we'll be thinking about other options, like potentially developing a survey that we might send out to the roundtables and trying to get some more feedback on the best direction to go. And with that, we will take any questions you have. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Russ. Any questions for Russ or Greg? Okay. Well done. We have a comment here.
I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware that we really used the water plan to mold how we did SWASI, and that SWASI has been seen as a technical foundation, but it is really the technical foundation in combination with those basin implementation plans. I am so excited about the costing tool, because as we looked at the water plan and we were moving forward on policy, and so much was reliant on projects and the cost, and how we made decisions was going to be based on that. So that was pulled into SWASI, and you really can only say a project is going to come to fruition when you know how much it costs, and how you prioritize is based on that. So I think that this team has done so much work that to make this the best product possible for the state. And to feed into how the basins are going to do their work and help them and make sure that it's useful data so that the basins can put out their best product also. So I just wanted to make sure that the board knew how much work has gone into this effort. So thank you to that team.
All right. Well done. Thanks. All right. Agenda item number 20, Colorado Water, or the Youth Corps Partnership. Eric?
All right. For the record, Eric Sky, Colorado Water Conservation Board staff. Don't worry, I'm not going to be presenting this item. Just saw a couple size relief. Yeah. I'm just here to introduce the actual speaker. So behind me here, we have Scott Segerstrom. He's the executive director of the Colorado Youth Corps Association. I kind of touched a little bit on our partnership that we've had, at least through the Free Adaflight Control Program with the CYCA. And I wanted to invite him here today to really highlight what I think is a really awesome partnership that we have, and we've been able to work with these folks, and it's been great. So without further ado, Scott.
Scott, just state your name and who you're with for the record.
Thank you. Scott Segerstrom, Executive Director with the Colorado Youth Corps Association. Welcome. Thank you very much. I very much appreciate the invitation. Basically, two main points I want to get across today. I want to kind of make the CWCB Youth Corps Partnership 360 degrees for you, loop you into the work we're doing. But most importantly, I want to take advantage of this opportunity to offer a lot of gratitude and let you hopefully understand all the lives you've changed. It's pretty rare I get the chance to thank you in person. So that's a really important thing we want to accomplish today. So really quick overview of my organization. The Colorado Youth Corps Association works on behalf of 8 accredited corps in the state. And in 2017, we engaged almost 1,600 participants So we're a pretty large employer of youth, young adults, and veterans in Colorado. I think most relevant to the CWCB family is 127 of our members officially were certified to apply herbicide, and almost 300 members were certified in S212, which is the federally recognized wildland chainsaw certification. So in short, these are the young people that came, that are leaving our program with official credentials to help launch their career with the ability to be an applicator technician on the invasive species side and certified sawyers on the other side. So here's a quick snapshot of where the 8 cores in Colorado are located. And so you can see Mile High Youth Corps has the Front Range, the Western Slope split between Rocky Mountain, Western, and Southwest, and CWCB has partnered through CYCA with most of these cores. So a quick snapshot of our 2017 season. More than a third of our members belong to ethnic minorities. Our cores have an important mission to reflect the face of their local community. And so that's reflected in these numbers. About 43% are low income. We're still working, to be candid, on getting to a 50-50 split of female to male, but we're getting there. Those numbers are much better than they were 10 years ago. But the one number I really want to highlight to you, and I think the first point of gratitude for you to understand of what CWCB does for young people, what your legacy as a board is you help get people out of the chicken and egg scenario of where they can't get a job because they don't have experience, because they can't get a job. Youth Corps have an intentional mission to do that, but it doesn't happen without your partnership. This outcome is a direct result of your investment in us. If we don't have your resources, your projects, your belief, your commitment, then this doesn't happen. So please understand that you are giving people jobs. You're putting them on the path to economic independence. You're increasing their self-esteem. It's phenomenal. And so we're just so grateful for that. So a really quick snapshot from 10,000 feet of everything cores do. So trail construction and maintenance remains the largest piece of the pie for us, with fire mitigation and suppression a close second. That's wildland firefighters. So we do direct fire suppression. We do pre-treatment, defensible space, you name it. Invasive species eradication, we'll dive into a little bit, but of course that is the CWCB's primary service delivery through Youth Corps. But we also do infrastructure, mining operations. We do a lot of work with DRMS, doing tree planting on former mine locations. Historic preservation of structures. That's a really cool mission in which we use traditional skills to rebuild old homesteads, barns, cultural resources, you name it. So, and then green energy installation. That's primarily an urban intervention. CFL light bulbs, high efficiency toilets, you name it. And we can recruit interns for any of these scopes of work. So from the big picture, Colorado Youth Corps Association is incredibly fortunate to have essentially a master agreement with Department of Natural Resources. So there are 2 different ways that I work with your agency. One is through this master task order, or the other is through a purchase order, whatever is most convenient. But in terms of filling in the large picture, we're very fortunate to have this easy contracting mechanism so that we can deploy crews really quickly as a DNR agency identifies a need. Really impressive numbers. These, I can't overestimate the impact of lives this has. Just in the last 3 years, we've done almost 200 weeks of work. We've leveraged more than about $1.4 million of funding from the DNR family into jobs, scholarship, training, conservation impact. We are an army of youth and young adults and veterans that DNR has leveraged to incredible impact. And so the numbers then show that over 63,000 hours of service, 1,200 acres of invasive weeds and species, invasive species. Whatever DNR calls on us to do, we can do it. If you can dream it, we'll find a way to do it. But it doesn't happen without the incredible vision of Director King, Director Randall, and the agency heads like Becky to deploy us. Former Director King, I should say, for the record. not fomenting a coup. So I was just emailing Denver Water. Mike's on my mind. But let me drill a little deeper into the CWCB partnership. So this is a really cool picture, actually, just to take a really quick side trip. Western Colorado Conservation Corps, based out of Grand Junction, does all of Mesa County, all the way to Gunnison. They do some really cool projects with CWCB in which our participants basically float down the river and eradicate invasive species as they go. So they grab rafts, they grab chainsaws, they grab everything they need to spray invasives, and spend all day and often multi-day camping trips down the river, working to ensure those ecosystems return to health. So this is a really cool assignment that you invest in and that we partner with the BLM quite frequently on. So since 2013, when the CWCB partnership really began, my predecessor, Jen Freeman, presented to your board. Your agency generously bought into what we were selling, and you see what that's produced. So since then, we've done 17 projects over 28 weeks, almost $250,000 we've received from your agency, and you can see the project outputs. But equally, if not more important, is the economic impact on the next generation of conservationists that you are having. This is your legacy. Almost 200 jobs created for young adults and veterans, over 10,000 hours of service, almost 900 hours of leadership development and environmental education. We are an employment program. Our participants work for us. They're held accountable. Many of them are undergoing their first employee review. They're undergoing their first time having professional expectations, being evaluated by a supervisor, knowing what it's like to be expected to wake up at 6 a.m., work by 8 a.m., put in a 40-hour week. But equally important is the personal development of our young people. We are not a contractor. It's not what we do. We want to improve not just the environment, but the young people that come through our program. So when we talk about these, we call it service, not work. And when we talk about almost 900 hours of personal development, that's a massive impact. That's young people that are learning to be empathetic, learning to be leaders, getting away from screen time, undoing that nature deficit disorder. There are a number of amazing impacts that come to our young people when you support us to deploy on Colorado's lands. It's phenomenal. So a quick overview on the return on your investment. This is what you get when you invest in Youth Corps. To our incredible pleasure and honor, a diverse constituency for the outdoors. We get young people, youth and young adults out on Colorado public lands that normally wouldn't. People see their first nighttime skies because of CWCB's investment. They learn to become informed voters, engaged citizens. They understand the important role that outdoor recreation and water plays, not just in Colorado's economy, but Colorado's culture. We engage young people in stewardship and have that gateway experience that makes them more mature, more successful, more productive. It's a tremendous epiphany for them. Their first job experience we touched upon, economic independence, and equally accomplish much needed work in a high quality manner. These are certified sawyers. These are qualified supervisors overseeing the applicator technicians. It is a fully mechanized, fully recognized program. You send people to college. I know that's not what you immediately think of when you engage Youth Corps, but you send people to college. You directly send the next generation of Coloradans to school. And you do that through AmeriCorps. So my organization, Colorado Youth Corps Association, holds the largest AmeriCorps grant in the state of Colorado. So it's a $1.5 million annual fixed award. That's the style of AmeriCorps grant. So a young person comes to a Corps, they're enrolled in AmeriCorps, and they make a commitment to do to reach a threshold of service hours. And when that's reached, they qualify for what we call an education award. It's essentially a college scholarship. It does two things. One of two things. It can be used for future tuition, or it can be used to reduce existing student loan debt. So if they've already been to school, we make them more economically independent. If they haven't been to school yet, we send them there. But they don't get there unless they're on projects, unless we have the opportunity to deploy them. So when you provide funds for Youth Corps projects, you are sending people to school. You're educating them. You're giving them brighter prospects for life. It's tremendous. So in just last year, in my grant alone, so among the 8 corps, there are multiple AmeriCorps grants. But what I know best is the one we manage. So in 2017, we enrolled 312 members who earned $500,000 collectively for scholarships. And statewide, I forgot I did pull all that data. Statewide, we enrolled 671 members and gave them $1.2 million. That's just 1 year. That's 1 year of investing in Youth Corps created over $1 million to send people to school through that program. It's tremendous. So thank you for investing in what we do. Without resources, without projects, without the opportunity to develop these young people, it doesn't happen. We constrict and we grow according to the resources we have. So when the opportunity comes, if the opportunity comes for CWCB to grow their investment in Youth Corps, please be mindful that what that equates to is plenty of acres cleared, plenty of new rivers, healthy, accessible, but it also equates to people going to community college, learning a trade, getting professional certifications, becoming productive Coloradans. And so we just really thank you. And I would be remiss not to mention 3 people in particular. One is Becky Mitchell for her belief in what we do. Her leadership, her vision, her passion is tremendous. Chris Sturm is outstanding as kind of the administrator of our program. And of course, Eric Sky is unsurpassed in the partner world of getting things done, fully supportive, open-minded, innovative. So the CWCB team is on the Mount Rushmore of Youth Corps partners. It's really outstanding. So with that, I want to respect your time, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thanks for your presentation. This has always been a mystery to me because Youth Corps has done a lot of work up in Routt County and Moffett County, and we're just amazed at what they've done for our trails and our mitigation efforts. Can you tell me how you engage the local entities, whether they're water conservation districts or counties, or however you get engaged and identify projects?
Specifically for CWCB or more in an overarching manner, sir? Oh, absolutely. So my organization holds essentially master agreements with a lot of the partners. So what I'm able to offer is one-stop shopping. So if you look at that map, there's 8 corps. That's a lot of water districts. It's a lot of national forests, a lot of CPW state parks. I go to those partners and say, look, I will handle everything for you. I'll just be the single pipeline of money, reporting, fiscal agent, you name it. So that's where the conversation generally starts, is efficiency. So I sit down with Director Broscheid, or I sit down with Chris Custodian at GoCo, or Becky Mitchell and Eric, or you name it, and say, what can I do for you? Where do you want work done? What resources do you have? And I'll handle the rest. So that happens in the wintertime, and it's really kind of that simple. I mean, we've built the relationships, the trust, the credibility as a known entity. So we sit down in the wintertime and say, what are your priorities? Steamboat Lake State Park in Routt County, maybe, and Sylvan Lake down in Eagle. Great. Those are 2 different corps, 2 different projects, 2 different crew week rates. But the good news is you just deal with me. You write one check, you get one final report, you have one 24/7 help desk. And so that efficiency is largely how a lot of these projects get developed. Is that helpful, sir?
I just wanted to highlight, this is one of my favorite things to talk about is Youth Corps. So I just wanted to make sure that the board recognized that we've been working with the Youth Corps partnership and making sure they get out to the basin roundtables. There's folks out at the Basin Roundtable level that have used Youth Corps through their Water Supply Reserve Fund grants and have had great success. It's been financially not a burden. That they're not charging more for the same work. Oftentimes you're able to get work done that couldn't be done by machines and tools, that it really takes on the ground work and people being able to get out there and get into remote areas. I've heard of many success stories. I'd love to hear of more. I get to get a little bit personal, but I just, so that you guys know, those stats are not misleading or fake. My oldest son is in Yosemite now. He did many years with Youth Corps. He started in Colorado. He went all over the Western states working in Youth Corps and became leadership in Youth Corps. And now he's working with the Forest Service in Yosemite. That kind of change in who he was a skinny jeans and lots of hair product kind of kid, and now he wears khakis, and I still have his first chainsaw cut from when he was certified. I watched the transformation, and he's gotten the scholarships. He's been benefiting with that, and so I love what this does. And as we talked about staffing this morning, this is the future. And these people that are going through this program know the value of the work that they do. And I am so proud of our partnership with Youth Corps. It's amazing. So I just wanted to make sure that you take these messages back and think about them when there's an opportunity. It's not just invasive and free out of fight control. It's everything that you can imagine. So thank you, Scott, and thank you for your work.
Oh, thank you. And Carhartt has rebuffed my efforts for skinny jeans to this point. I have advocated for this. The one thing I would add to Becky's comments, she mentioned the next generation of employees. And so just in 30 seconds, what we recognized at CYCA was a lot of our members came through and had this transformative experience, right? So they personally developed, strengthened, matured, while equally got all of these really high value professional certifications. It's no small thing to be an applicator technician or a certified sawyer. And so we wanted to build a better bridge from our program into a professional natural resource career. So just so you're aware, because this is really important to us, we wrote a book called A How-To Guide for Pursuing a Career in Natural Resources. So some of the dollars that you give us that remain with my agency goes into efforts like this, in which DNR has a whole portion of a chapter in here which explains the hiring process, the rules, when to apply, where to apply. We demystify the process. So just be aware that is a mission for us. We want Youth Corps members to be on the CWCB board and be a director in the future. We want our voice heard. We want to develop leaders and the next generation of visionaries for Colorado. So that is definitely something that's near and dear to us. And I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Scott. I just want to make a comment. Growing up in agriculture, this was inherent in our job as a kid. You got to go outside and help irrigate, and it gave you a respect for the land and for the water. And I think just by watching this, you're giving other kids that may not get the opportunity to have that same experience. So I think it's a great thing that you're doing.
Sure, we appreciate it. Yeah, couldn't do it without you. Couldn't do it without you.
All right, so agenda item 21, Laura.
Actually a question. So I'm so excited because usually I don't get questions. I'm happy to respond to any questions that you may have. If the rumor is true.
Dutton.
Thank you. My question is about item 9 of your report, noting Audubon's filing of their opening brief and how it was quite late. I was curious who's representing Audubon or who's their attorney in this case?
Audubon is represented by the DU Environmental Law Clinic, and the supervising attorney's name is Kevin Lynch. And the Environmental Law Clinic has, I believe, 3 different suits right now that they've filed against either state agencies or projects that have been supported by the state. So it's not an unusual, I guess I could call them firm, who chooses to exercise its rights. I will say the environmental clinic is a very good positive experience, I think, for a lot of students. I personally, and this isn't the views of the Attorney General's office, I personally think that there's greater opportunity to teach them about being a responsible practitioner, because we do see them pushing certain filings that skirt the edge of what I would consider frivolous. But that really wasn't your question, but I hope I answered your question. Any other questions? Well, if there are no more questions pursuant to statute, I'd recommend that the board make a motion to go into executive session after the break to consider items 22A through F as identified on the board's agenda. This session is authorized pursuant to the provisions of Section 246402(3)(a)(2) of the Colorado Revised Statutes.
Thank you. Director Dutton? It's been moved by Director Dutton, seconded by Director Wells, that we go into executive session. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll reconvene for our executive session.
executive session to consider agenda items 22A through F, and no final decisions were made during executive session.
All right, thank you. So we'll continue on. Agenda item 24A. That's Carly. All right, thanks, Carly.
Chairman Yan, thank you, members of the board. Again, Carly Brown, the Interstate Federal and Water Information section. And so as Karen has stated previously, she works very closely with our section. And so our section prepares this request officially for you. And so my job is to come here and read the staff recommendation to you, because I know that Karen has well prepared you to make this decision. And in addition to Karen's request for future funding, though, there's another obligation of ours as CWCB staff, which is to prepare a report to the General Assembly. So that report was item 24A in your briefing book. And then item 24B was the request for next year. So first, I'll refer you to item 24A. This is the report that basically it's actually very confusing to prepare, because we put together the memo that was prepared for the request last year for 2017. And when we put that into the new format for the report for 2018, and then we take the meeting minutes from last year, we assemble that all into one package. So basically the General Assembly can see what you saw last year and approved, and we report back. And then we also say how the funds were actually spent for this year. So that's item 24A, and staff recommendation is for the board to approve that report for submittal to the General Assembly.
Wells?
I move approval of the report to submit to the General Assembly.
Moved by Director Wells, seconded by Director Dutton, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 24A. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you. 24B. This is the detailed by basin, the Attorney General's request for the litigation fund for this year. So staff's recommendation is that the board authorize an expenditure of a total of $1,294,300 for litigation-related activities in fiscal year 2018-19 as detailed in the report. If I could ask Director Chartrand, do I need to read those numbers out specifically? Okay. Oh, and maybe I'll just add in these. Staff also recommends that the board direct the CWCB director and staff to expend these funds consistent with the request by the Office of the Attorney General, and direct the CWCB director, CWCB staff, and Office of the Attorney General to comply with annual reporting requirements, as we just did.
I also have a clarification. We got an updated memo, which maybe is on the board portal now, right? That you sent in an email?
Just now?
No, Tuesday at 7 p.m. Yesterday.
And I can...
That's now in the official record. It appears where it needs to appear.
It's a good point, though, Director Wells. Normally, that would be incorporated into the memo as posted online, and we did not update that yet onto the version that's online. But what we can do is we can make it a combined PDF and have that permanently linked for this agenda item going forward, as we normally would. This memo, as was provided to you in your board notebook and is currently online, says that that report is pending. So it's not pending anymore.
Director Gallagher.
So yeah, this is part of that was last year's request, actually. Yeah. So you were looking at item 20A, and that was last year's request, and that had a red line in it because we also had sort of a late game change in last year's request as well. But you don't have to worry about that one.
Would you prefer, board, that we read the numbers?
Just to be sure we're approving the right thing.
Okay. Thanks. All right. So the total expenditure requested is $1,294,300. By basin, the Colorado River Basin is $643,000. The Republican River Basin is $118,000, and the Rio Grande Basin is $533,300. All right. Thank you.
Questions?
I'd be happy to make a motion. I'm not quite sure how to state it. Approval of the staff's recommendation for funding for the litigation fund in the amounts just provided by Carly. Oh, it has two parts. Oh, those are the same numbers. How great. Okay, never mind. I move to approve the staff recommendation for funding and to direct the director and staff to expend these funds consistent with the request by the Attorney General and direct everybody to comply with annual reporting requirements.
Moved by Director Wells, seconded by Director Goebel, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 24B, as Director Wells had just stated. So is there any further discussion? Yeah. Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So we're going to thank you, Carly and Karen. Since we have John Stolp in the audience, he's going to give his IBCC report late. That way we won't be behind tomorrow. So we'll go ahead and let him do that since we're a little ahead of schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You all look much better from this angle than when I'm sitting at the table, even for the lateness of the day. My apologies for not being here this morning. I was actually meeting with Commissioner Brown and some ag folks over some water quality issues that trying to look into the future and know what we need to be doing or not doing there. And so thank you for letting me give the IBCC report late. Okay, thank you. And my thanks to staff who's helped put this slideshow together. And that's, I think it's in order to keep me within a time frame. But anyway, the IBCC met earlier this month, I believe is on the 2nd. And to kind of refresh your memory, we've got 3 different working groups or task groups talking about funding concepts and the potential of a ballot initiative or at least a question referred measure, whatever might happen to develop the continued long-term funding that's necessary for implementation of the water plan. And then the conceptual framework, we've had a work group looking into that, and I'm going to give you a little more information on that here shortly, as well as another group developing a candidate letter for, being this is an election year, and kind of taking the lead from previous IBCC efforts, the letter to the 2 governors. And so let me talk just for a moment about the IBCC discussion. And let me pause just for a moment and thank those members of this board that attended that up at Keystone, I believe. And it always, I think, is very meaningful, hopefully to you as well as to IBCC members when they see board members attending and oftentimes participating. And so this is kind of to give you an update as to where we're at on the discussion. We're very much at the stage of a straw man, discussing the possibilities. We haven't come to any broad consensus other than that we are probably not capable of figuring out what the source might be. But we feel that it's important that IBCC in conjunction with the Conservation Board have input into how that money might be invested in Colorado's water future. And so the discussion still very much that there is a couple parallel paths being going on in the state. The Gates Family Foundation and the Waltons have a group that several of us in this room are participating in, as well as a couple other entities. The Colorado Cattlemen's are deciding a group of ag people to come together. And so there's a lot of interest in this. And so I think hopefully the trick is to have them all converge at the same time with a somewhat similar plan. And so it's going to be a busy summer. But back to the IBCC discussion there on the right side, you see this is a straw man of 5 or 6 potential areas of investment we might consider. And obviously the wheel there for the water plan, all 6 of these on this slide are consistent with the implementation of the water plan. How much do we need? What sort of allocations there might be? Those are all important things that need to be worked out. Are those the right type of categories? Is it comprehensive enough? And then the other big question that has got a lot of attention is who manages these funds, who invests them? And there's kind of 2 general areas of thought. One is to have the Water Conservation Board. It has the experience of 70-some years of continuing with this task. The other possibility is some discussion around is a new entity, somewhat similar to the model of the GOCO board that was established by constitutional change. So jury's still out. We're still having those conversations. We continued the discussion around the conceptual framework. Those are the 7. I like the animation there. I don't know how to do that. And so, Russ, you did a great job. But we had the opportunity to have a presentation from the SPROG, the South Platte Regional Opportunity Working Group. I think I got that right, Jim. And so I thought that was a great exercise to take a look, even though it's not a Trans Mountain diversion. It has certain aspects of considerations that go into certain components, some of those 7 items that are in the conceptual framework. And so we're still having some discussion there. And at the present time, the direction is, we'll leave the framework where it is. It seems to be generating the right kind of discussion at this point. And at some future point, if there is a project with proponents, that will be the real test of this. Not that we can't have some discussion and some of the areas around conservation and environmental protection and those sort of things are certainly applicable, whether they're in the conceptual framework or if they're just in other parts of the water plan. The candidate letter, this letter's been developed, and I think we have a nod from nearly everybody that was involved in it. It's going to be sent out by the Conservation Board on behalf of the IBCC. It's already been shared with the roundtables. The roundtables have been looking at it and had a number of questions on how they should or shouldn't use it. And we've been very liberal with that because this is just to draw attention to people that are running for a statewide office that, we have a process in Colorado. It's working quite well. It's worked under 3 different administrations and hope that they'll give it the credibility that it deserves and not necessarily want to run off and create something new. Another kind of nuance is the Doug Kemper with Water Congress has contacted the Conservation Board staff and others about potentially doing a companion type of letter from the Water Congress. And so we're sharing this letter with the Water Congress folks and so we can be consistent as a water community as we talk to these new candidates that are running for statewide office. We also indicated the roundtables, if they think it's important that county commissioners or the assessor or the treasurer, the sheriff, whoever else in their county would be educated by sharing this with them, why they use their own discretion going forward with that. And so I think most of you know the roundtables have been having not only their individual meetings, but some caucuses over on the west slope, well attended, filled up Ute water. and a number of you were on the program. There were West Slope and East Slope folks there, and a great panel on how the conceptual framework, kind of what some of the thinking was behind it. And I think it was very educational for that program. The East Slope is having their caucus in 13th of June, I believe it is. And as any meeting, it's a public meeting, and anybody and everybody's certainly welcome to come and attend and observe the discussion there. And then I don't know how much of the drought discussions you had earlier today, and then I'll repeat what Bob said and Becky, but I'm sure Bob mentioned to you that the governor has initiated a drought declaration. The Ag Impact Task Force is starting to go to work. Obviously, with a lot of our federal partners, we're very dry. Although I talked to a gentleman from Julesburg at the roundtable the other night, and he had only been in the field 7 days this spring because it's been so wet in that far northeast corner. And so you can see the gradient there. The northern part of the state has been getting good rains, and so we're kind of certainly a state of many extremes. That dark brown there is the exceptional drought. Doesn't get any drier than that, or we just stop keeping track, I guess. But of the 5 different stages, we have them all in abundance statewide. Over 80% of the state, which is kind of, I guess that's an improvement. We were at 98%, I think, during the winter. And so, but it certainly is a concern. And I think out of that there will probably be Taryn Fennessey is directing that as our state climate person, working with CSU, working with USDA and other federal agencies. And most likely there'll be 1 or 2 drought tours later this year. I think she's got one tentatively looking at maybe in July. Also, the Water Availability Task Force typically meets each month or 2, and they're going to meet, I believe, down in Durango in July also. So that'll be one of the few times that they've met out of the Denver area, kind of go down and take a on-the-scene look at the severity, and then have those people an opportunity to participate rather than just do it online and by phone. At this, one other quick thing, I think you're aware of because of the declaration of the drought, that makes available from the Water Conservation Board $1 million for agriculture water augmentation. And most of the water companies, irrigation companies know about that, but if they don't, why? In their normal course of business, if they can find water in this drought to buy, then they can apply for some reimbursement from this $1 million fund. Some years it's gone totally unused. Other years it's been over appropriated, and then it kind of gets allocated if that's the case. So any questions for me or anybody else, the IVCC, or anybody else that attended some of the meetings?
Questions for John or any other comments? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. We're even a little ahead of schedule. So that's our last agenda item for today. Thank you for your attendance and for all the reports that we got. And we'll consider ourselves in recess until 8:45 tomorrow. So thanks.